Hi there, it's Lauren from laurenmakesitwork.com. Today I'm going to talk to you about fiber reactive dyes. I know usually I talk about sewing, but today it's dyes, which is one of the other things that I love to do. If I'm not sewing, I'm usually ice dyeing something. So, what we're going to talk about today is some traditional tie-dye techniques and one really easy shibori style dye technique that I like to use with clothespins. So join me as we talk about what fiber reactive dye is, what primary colors are, and how you can wrap up a bandana and create your own personal tie-dyed garment. Covalent bonds are one of the strongest bonds in chemistry. However, this reaction takes time to develop. It also requires a certain pH level. So in your dye kit, in those bottles, I've added your dye, your wetting agent called urea, and I've added your pH adjuster, which is called soda ash. The fiber or the dye molecules in the fiber reactive dye are able to stick to the fibers. So that's why this works, is science. A covalent bond helps chroma molecules attach to your clothing fibers. Isn't that cool? So I'm going to show you how I like to wrap rubber bands in the traditional tie-dye technique. First, you make a little mountain with your finger underneath the fabric and pinch the top, holding it tight with one hand and wrapping it with the rubber band in another. I wrap once, twist, and wrap again. Twist and wrap again. This makes it much easier to unwrap at the end because they're all kind of going in the same direction. And when you unwrap them, they all kind of come off in a chain reaction of unwrapping. This style of binding is in the shibori style. I have folded the fabric in an accordion fold and brought all the folded edges up together and clipped them with a clothespin about equidistant apart. This way, every place there is a clothespin, there's going to be an area of white that the dye doesn't adhere to. This is how I accordion fold, grab another fold, pinch, straighten it out, fold again, and then you'll just clip your clothespins to the very top of that fold. So in the bandana kit, I have 4 of these 27 by 27 ready to dye cotton bandanas. In your kit, you'll have 3 bottles of primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, which will then make secondary colors like purple, green, and orange. In your kit, you're going to have rubber bands, and those rubber bands will create a resist. So everywhere your rubber band is will be a white or very lightly dyed area. That's what's called a resist. There's a style from Japan called shibori, and in the kit you have clothespins, and you can use the clothespins to create a shibori style resist after folding your fabric as an accordion and then clipping the clothespins onto it. And that creates a resist wherever the clothespins are and where some of the folds are in the fabric. And now let's move on to the messy part. We're going to add just enough warm, almost hot water to the bottom of your dye bottle. Put the lid back on and shake it for a good 60 seconds. Not all of the particles will dissolve, but we're looking for most of the sediment at the bottom to have liquefied. Now just top off the dye bottle with some more very warm water. Pop the lid back on, shake it up so that all the little bits dissolve, and your dye bottle is ready to go. Now let's make that magic happen with the red dye and the yellow dye. Now our dyes are all ready to use on our damp bandana. We've wetted the bandana down with some plain water, and now I like to wet it down with the lightest color first, which is, in this case, the yellow. Now, as you can see at the bottom of the bag, the dye collects. One of the ways to avoid this is to squirt directly onto the fabric, or you could have your fabric on a basket or hold it over a sink or a bathtub. The reason I mention the other methods is because as the dye collects at the bottom of the bag, it is all going to mix together. And when you mix red, yellow, and blue, you don't really come up with much of a color. It's kind of mud. So if you want to avoid the excess dye in the bottom of the bag, you can always apply the dye first and put the item back in the bag at the end. Now the colors we have mixed are the primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. And as those three colors mix in the dye liquid on your bandana, they will create secondary colors, orange, green, and purple. Now my bandana is saturated with dye, and I'm going to let it rest for 4 to 24 hours, and I'm going to use my leftover in this t-shirt that I've wrapped up with rubber bands and clothespins. And once you rinse your bandana in cool water to remove most of the dye, you can launder it in a hot cycle in the washing machine. The extra dye I use to dye this t-shirt with rubber bands and clothespins. Now you can see what it looks like in a shibori styled fold and clip with the clothespins technique. All of those little white marks are where the wood of the clothespin was touching the fabric. So hopefully by now your tie-dye is all done and sitting in its sealed plastic bag, or maybe a garbage bag or a shopping bag, for 4 to 24 hours. After that, rinse it in cold water, throw it in the washing machine on a hot cycle and the dryer on regular, and your tie-dye is all set. It should be good to be laundered however you launder your clothes from now on out. My name is Lauren Durr. I'm from LaurenMakesItWork.com. Like and subscribe, and I hope you had a blast.